Hello everyone, this is Michael with Quiet Lawn. I hope you're having a great day. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I don't mention quantities and estimates for projects like mulch or sod. That would also include Christmas lights, things like that. This is coming from a conversation I just had with a friend of mine that also has a landscaping business, and he was talking about a job that they've been doing this past couple weeks where they were installing some sod for a customer, and the customer, they had measured it out, and it was looking like it was going to take about 2.5 pallets. So they sent the estimate to the customer. They mentioned in the estimate, that it was going to need 2.5 pallets of sod. When they actually went to do the job, either they mismeasured or something was off. Maybe the pallets were bigger than they expected, and they only ended up using about 1.5 pallets of sod, so they had an extra pallet left over. And what he said was the customer ended up, wanting money back, wanting a refund for the extra sod, stuff like that. So I think they had to, give I think they ended up giving the customer like $700 back or something like that. I've been there. I've done that. I used to do the same thing when I started out the first couple of years. When I would do a sod project, in the estimate, I'd say, you're going to need, 17 pallets of sod based on my measurements. You're going to need this many yards of topsoil. With mulch estimates, I would mention yardage and square feet. And I learned my lesson pretty quick to not do that with my estimates. And I'll tell you the reasons in a minute. But I mentioned this to my friend. I said, "Hey, you shouldn't mention any quantities in your estimates. Like you shouldn't mention that." And he said, "Well, I want to be transparent." And my point to him was like, "Hey, it's not about transparency. Like it's about giving the customer what they're looking for, and also there's no reason you need to mention the quantity. Like that's your business. So the customer, you got to think, they're looking for an outcome. They're asking you for an outcome. They're asking you to come out and measure their property and give them an estimate for what you would charge to either mulch their beds, resod their lawn, or whatever the project might be. They're not asking you to come out there and measure and tell them how much materials they need to complete that project. So by you giving that, you're not really giving them what they're looking for, because they don't care about that. They just want to know how much you would charge to complete the project for them. The other thing is, like, by giving that information, like, you're only setting yourself up for failure, because like in my friend's situation, if you end up buying extra materials, which we all do because you want to make sure you have enough, you don't want to come up like 1/4 pallet short. If we end up ordering extra materials, or we end up running short, then we're going to have to buy more, and the customer's not going to want to have to pay you for the extra mulch or sod that you mismeasured because you didn't do your thing correctly. So of course we're going to over order. But as my point to him was, like, I don't mention that stuff at all, because the customer wants an outcome. Hey, this is what I'll charge you to resod your lawn or to mulch your beds. This is what it's going to include. And it's my business as the contractor to make sure that I get enough materials to complete that job. And if the customer is willing to pay the price that I send to them and they agree to it, they don't have any right to tell me, like, what I need to order as far as materials. That's my business. That's my point with that. So when I send estimates, like, I don't mention quantities, because that's my job as a professional to make sure I have enough material. And if I order too much or not enough, that's going to be on me to make sure that I either order more and it's on my dime, or I have excess material that I have to carry off or haul off or do whatever I need to with. In the estimate, I want to show you how we do our estimates. We give very detailed estimates, but we just don't mention quantities because there's no point, and that's not what the customer's asking for. I also think another downside to mentioning quantities, is that the type of customer that asks for that is the type of customer that's going to shop your estimate around. So, I've had this in the past, and, you'll have customers that think they're sly, but they'll say, you'll measure the property, you'll do this, and they'll be like, well, how many yards of mulch is that? and I don't really give them an answer because one, they can go out and measure their own beds. I'm not going to do their job for them, so they can go shop my estimate with 4 other people. But I'll just say like, sir, that'll be enough to cover all your beds. We'll do about 2 to 3 inches of mulch, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. And if they want to go measure it, they can do that. Same thing with sod. If they say like, how many pallets of sod is that? I said I'd have to calculate it, but it's really hard to tell. We always try to order extra because sometimes you can get pallets of sod that are in better condition than others. Sometimes the bottom of the pallet is wasted. It just depends on the sod. And, if you're doing sod, that sometimes you get some pallets of sod that are dry or they've been cut a couple days prior and they just fall apart and you have a lot of waste. So I just avoid those questions with the customers, and to be honest, like, you rarely get those questions from customers because, like I said, they're not looking for that. The only type of customer that's going to need to know the quantity is the type of customer that's going to try to shop it. So most people, like I said, they just want the outcome. Hey, how much are you going to charge me to solve this problem? We're not mulch dealers. We're not sod dealers. We're not selling quantities of sod. We're not selling mulch. We're selling outcomes. We're selling, a bed renovation, a sod renovation, stuff like that. It's just like a painter. Like when you get an estimate from somebody to paint your house, like, you're not asking them like how many gallons of paint they're going to use. Oh, well, how many gallons of paint is that in this estimate? No, you don't. That would be crazy to ask that. Why would you do the same thing in our business? Like, hey, I asked you how much you charge to do this. You gave me a price. That sounds good to me. Let's do it. Everything else is your business. That's your job as a contractor and as a professional to make sure you have enough materials. And if you over order, that's cutting into your bottom line. If you under order, that's cutting into your bottom line. So it's your job to make sure you handle that. I told you the price I would pay for this outcome. I agreed to it, and that should be it. So let's just look at how I used to do my sod estimates. We haven't done sod in a few years, but we used to do a lot of big projects with sod. This is a pretty small one. This looks like maybe doing a small, tiny front yard, maybe a couple thousand square feet or something like that. Or I don't remember which project this was, but this is a small project. But you can see here my estimates. I give a lot of details. I just don't, what I want to mention is not quantities in my estimates. I want to mention the areas that they want taken care of. So you can see I don't mention like zoysia sod installation includes sod delivery, rolling, and installation. And it says where we're doing this. So this was in a fenced-in backyard only. I do want to make sure that I mention the areas that we are taking care of for the customer so that we don't get burned and they say, hey, you said you do the whole yard for this price. I want to make sure all that's mentioned in the estimate, and I want to be very clear about that. But you see, I don't mention any quantities here. Then I talk about the sod preparation, how much we're going to charge for that. Topsoil, I don't mention yardage. Like, I calculate that. That's my business as the professional to calculate that. And then I just mention the other stuff that we're doing here in the estimate. But I don't mention estimates. Down here I have some more details, telling them what we do, what the sod preparation includes, the topsoil, what that includes. But, it's a nice professional estimate here. I just don't, I don't mention quantities. Let me show you a mulch estimate. So this is a mulch estimate we did. This is probably a few years ago. But you can see here, same thing. We use bag mulch. It doesn't matter if you use bagged or bulk. It doesn't really matter. But you can see we mentioned here, this is Scott's Naturescapes Premium Mulch. They want black color. We don't mention the price per bag or anything like that. We just mention the total price for them and the other little optional things that we're doing here. This is the same as, as you can see, we're also doing aluminum edging for them in this quote. I don't mention the footage, like this is going to be 112 feet of aluminum edging, because they didn't really ask that. They didn't pay me to come out there and measure for them. They can do that themselves. They paid me for an outcome. How much are you going to charge me to do this? So we're mentioning all the details of the products that we're using, but we're just, like I said, that's our job to make sure we bring enough materials to complete that job. So I'll let you see that here. So that's what our estimates look like. They're like I said, they're pretty simple. They're very detailed, but they're just not sharing the quantities. I don't see any benefit for you to do that. The only time I mention quantities, mowing, you want to mention how many visits it's going to be. If you're doing some kind of work that, like sprinkler work or something like that, I was talking with my buddy Dan, like, maybe if you're selling sprinkler heads or zones, like installing zones, like you want to mention quantities and stuff like that. That stuff you need to mention because you need to charge for those materials and stuff like that. But as far as mulch and like sod, things like this, Christmas lights even, we don't say in a Christmas light estimate, hey, you have 120 foot of C9 lights. We just say this is the price to light the front roof line of your house, because I don't want the customer going out there counting lights. And like I said, they're not asking for that anyways. They're not paying for a certain number of lights. They're paying for what it costs to get lights on their house. So I hope that helps. I think this will really help your estimates. Very few people ever even ask, because like I said, if they have good intentions, your customer, all they want is to get a price for an outcome. If it's the only people that have ever asked, which is a handful in the past that I've done business with, the only people that will grill further and be like, well, how many pallets or how many yards is that, are people that are going to shop you around, or they're trying to get you to measure it for themselves so they can order it and do it themselves, but they just don't have the mathematical ability, or just don't want to put in the effort to measure for themselves and calculate that for themselves. But I hope that helps. This will greatly resolve some of these issues. Where you show up at a job. If you are at a job and you sod and you overestimate, because sometimes it's hard to measure like weird shapes, and sometimes you have more or less waste than other jobs. So you might have some left over. If the customer ever asked about that, if I have a bunch of mulch left over or I have a bunch of sod, if it's mulch, I'll say, yeah, we always make sure we bring a lot extra to make sure we have enough, and we'll take the rest back to the shop. Or if they ask if we had an extra pallet sod, I'll say something like, yeah, we like to we like to do all these little jobs together, so we ordered enough to do another little small job, and we'll just take it with us. But really, it's not their business. They didn't buy sod or mulch from us. They didn't buy the materials. They paid us to do their property. That doesn't mean that if we do their property and we have some left over, we have extra materials, that's theirs, or that we're going to spend another 3 or 4 hours installing those materials because we bought them. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, these are our materials. We did what we agreed to. We sodded your fenced-in backyard. We mulched your beds. That job's done. These are our materials. We're taking them with us. So that's how we do it. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. If there's any other topics you want me to cover, I'd be happy to. And I appreciate y'all watching. Have a great day.